Okay, welcome along everyone tonight. Looks like we've got a full house. For those that have, it looks like tonight we've got a mixture in the audience of people who have entered Bright Ideas, who have got through the next stage, some of you that haven't quite made it through the next stage, and then there's just other interested parties. Apparently there's a whole bunch of students here as well. When we come, so we're going to cover off tonight, we're going to do, you're going to got me for 40 minutes talking a little bit around business models. So in a minute I'm going to ask you if there's anything you want to know about business models, because I just realised that having spent an hour with someone and they said, oh, you're going to cover this? And I said, well, no, we're not, but maybe we can, and we can modify what we're going to do in the next 40 minutes. And then Leon's going to kick in, and then there'll be a bit of time for questions along the way. I'd encourage all of you just to interrupt and ask questions as we go through this evening's session, so that we've got a chance for you to get your questions answered. I could go on about this topic all night long. So this is basically what we're going to talk about tonight, which is, what's the relevance? We're going to talk a little bit about revenue streams. There's a hell of a lot of gobbledygook when it comes to business models. I've got a list about a mile long of different types of ones. My take on all this sort of stuff when it comes to business is it's 80% common sense, 10% learning the lingo. So if you learn the lingo, you're about 90% of the way there. Because often, this is one of the big problems we have in trying to help people out when they're getting ahead with their business, is just simply getting everyone talking the same language. And I spent a little bit about my background. I was actually originally an electronics design engineer. I began my career out at Gracefield at Lower Hutt in the old days of the government research labs. Used to be called Department of Scientific and Industrial Research. So I spent a large chunk of my life creating widgets. In fact, Leon is the master of creating widgets. He's going to be talking about his business later on. And then I moved into the game of, went out and worked for a company up in Martin, and ended up getting involved in growing a little company out there. We grew a product line from nothing to $32 million a year out of a town of Martin. Those that know where Martin is, it's between Palmerston North and Wanganui. I used to know the population 6,702 or something it used to be. Hell, our customers didn't even know where New Zealand was, so what does it matter where Martin is? And so then I moved on beyond that, did a whole lot of engineering stuff, international sales and marketing, and spent the last 3 years looking at businesses who are looking to raise capital and get investment in their business. And this is always, of course, one of the big questions, and very quickly comes up on the table, what is your business model? In which case, a lot of entrepreneurs or wannabe business people just look at you at a blank stare. This is not a hard question to answer, and this is what we're going to cover off in the next 40 minutes. Is there anything in particular you guys want me to talk about this evening? When I talk about business models, any particular areas you want covered? Anyone want to put their hand up? Yeah?
Business models as regards start-up and early stage companies.
Okay, well, this is the topic of the night, but yep, start-up. Early stage, yep. Any other areas people want me to cover? Yep. Exporting. Anything else? Okay, so we will cover those off along the way. Pretty fundamental to all this is a concept around the fact, are you running a hobby or are you running a business? And those that came along to the last session that I spoke about, how do you get your story right and how do you write your 100 words, the same story came up, and it's going to keep on reoccurring. You're really, really good at something, you're really, really passionate about it, that is not enough. Sorry guys, that's how we define a hobby. The next question, of course, is how do you make money? Because if you don't have money coming into your business, you don't have a business, you've got a hobby. And so this is where the question around the business model comes up, because there are a whole lot of fundamental questions about how does money flow into your business, how does that all hang together? And there's another bunch of circles here. By the way, all these slides are going to be on the Bright Ideas website. And you can download them later on if you want. There's a little handout that you've been given. There's a couple of slides that I'm going to reference back to as we go through this evening. And so what do you do well? What can we get paid for? What do we want to do? And of course, right in the middle there is the hooray moment, and of course, equally so, deciding what not to do. And this is fundamentally, I find when I talk to a lot of business people, the biggest issue is to decide what not to do as opposed to what to do. I've never yet met a person that's, you talk to them and say, well, you've got another idea, haven't you? And they say, yeah. And we've got another one and another one and another one and another one. So how do you choose which one is the best idea for you? And trying to get that nice little sweet spot. Now, the interesting thing about operating your business is you've got to become very conscious about how your business hangs together. Now, I always give the example of there's a learning process that everyone goes through. And the easiest way to illustrate this learning process is to talk about it when you learn to drive your car. You know, you're about to start a business. It's no different to like when you're beginning to learn to drive a car. When you were beginning, right back when you were a young kid, you were unconscious of your incompetence. This is what happens when you're a 10-year-old. You want to go to soccer, mum just takes you. That just happens, right? You hit the magic age of 15, apparently now 16. All of a sudden, all your mates have got their license. You want to have your license. You want to have that freedom. And so you become very conscious of your incompetence. Now, despite the legislation that's gone through, I fundamentally believe in the old days, at age 15, you are the safest driver that you will ever be. Why? Because you are very consciously competent. For those who've been driving for a few years, remember back, you used to drive the car, no radio, no one talk to me, I'm concentrating. I'm driving the car. What happens usually is 6 or 7 months down the track, you start to hang out with your mates and you start to do all the reckless things, and this is where we end up staying and spending so much of our life, in the unconscious competence. We're just going through, we drove here tonight, oh my gosh, can you remember the last 3 or 4 intersections? Who was crossing the road? No, because you're thinking, wow, it's going to be cool tonight. We're going to talk about business models. And so, your mind wanders. Now, the same thing goes for your business, and it comes back to your business model. How does your business hang together? You've got to become very conscious of how money flows in and what are all the components that glue your business together. Fundamentally, it's going to be linked to your strategy. There's a great book written called The Rockefeller Effect, Rockefeller Habits. And this guy, I've sort of adapted this diagram, he breaks down business strategy into these 2 areas. His concept is that every bit of business strategy can be described by these 2 bubbles. How do you get, keep and grow customers, shareholders and employees? And equally so on the process side of things, how do you become better, faster and cheaper at how you sell stuff, whether you make or buy stuff, and how you process stuff. And a lot of this circle is going to be tied up with tuning your business model about how things flow in and out of your business. Now, it's interesting, one of the first things that comes up when you start talking to people about, you see all these people that go and pitch to investors, and one of the first questions that people will say is, look, tell us about your business model, and because they want to understand it, and I think when it comes to investment, what I always say to people is classify it, describe it, and quantify it. And one of the first things we always want to know is, how many revenue streams have you got? And so what do I mean by a revenue stream? A revenue stream is a way in which money flows into your business. Think of Fisher & Paykel Healthcare. They've got a fantastic business model. They make respirator units that go into operating theatres. Bits of technical equipment. Now, the interesting thing, when you've got a business with multiple revenue streams, you can become quite robust to change. Now, the global financial crisis came along and all the hospitals stopped buying medical equipment. Did Fisher & Paykel Healthcare go bust? No. Because you know what? Every time someone goes into the operating theatre, they replace a $50 US dollar filter. Next person comes into the operating theatre, they put another $50 US filter in. Have you bought toner or ink for your printer lately? I just bought a new colour duplex printer for $590. Phenomenal. It costs that for a couple of toners. And so, this is the consumer model and the revenue streams that are coming with it. And so, when we look at this stuff, we say, well, look, how does the money flow in and where does it come from and in what shape and form? Now, when you have a look at this business model, my challenge to all of you is don't just think in the natural way in which you think. What if, sitting in this spare chair was Richard Branson? If Richard Branson was sitting around the table looking in on your business, advising your business, what would he be telling you to be doing with your business model? And what you're doing with the aspirations and where you're going? Likewise, if it was a Google, heaven forbid if it was a Central Intelligence Agency of the US, that's the complete other risk-adverse end. And so depending on where you naturally sit, you want to keep looking at these things. And the whole point about doing a business model for your business is, one, to be very conscious of where you are and explore other alternatives. It's interesting, Amazon had a fantastic business model. And then one day they looked at their business model and said, you know what, we've got all these big servers here. We don't just have to be a bookstore. What if we sell some of our computing power to someone else? And this is a classic case of looking at the core elements of what you've got and doing something different with it. Equally so, look at your supply and value chain. Who makes money off doing what you do? And it's an interesting thing, one of the big telltale signs of a successful business is by selling your product, you make someone else make a lot of money. Who makes money when you sell your product or service? How are they going to make money? And often it's just a case of looking at it through the supply chain and saying, look, where do all these people make their money? Now, one of the challenges you will face, of course, is in many cases, when you're starting off, you sell direct to end user. You need to make sure there's enough margin in it so that when you scale up and become bigger, you can afford to pay these other people along the line. Otherwise, your business model collapses. It was interesting last night, as I usually do, last minute, preparing these sort of presentations, and I thought, I'll just do a Google and see if there's something else out there that I don't know of yet. And I came across this chicken and pigs thing, which is, in fact, I've ordered the book off Amazon, but and it's certainly worthwhile going looking at it. If you Google chicken and pigs models and strategies and Harrod Starr, you'll come up with this. It's got a nice little website explaining some of the stuff. But this again looks at some fundamentals of your business and how it hangs together. What is the transaction frequency of your customers? Do they buy it off you once, or do they buy it off you repeatable times? This is the old, the Amway soap. Flush it down the sink every time. Keep buying more of it, or do you just buy one of these things and that's the end of it? How much do you make your money? How much money and revenue? What margin contribution do you get off your customers when they buy? And so you need to work out which one of these squares do you end up in. Are you selling a high value item to a small bunch of people? Or are you selling, and this is where people start talking about clip the ticket subscription, and this often comes back to, if you're going to head to this, what are your customers, how are they going to buy and what are you going to get off them? Now, equally so, look at how your customer's business model works. Now, there's a classic case. I used to run the business incubator here in Wellington a number of years ago. And we had a great company. Stephen, he ran a company called InnerWorks. They did a really cool compiler which shrinks down the code that goes on mobile phones. They were selling it to game producers around the world. They used to sell this bit of software about $5,000 US a pop. Things were sort of going okay, but he was struggling a little bit. And so we were doing a bit of work around his pricing model. And we had a look at his pricing model. And one of the fundamental questions we asked him was, how do your customers make money? His customers made money by designing games and selling the games, and they got a little royalty that trickled in, a little bit at a time. And so here we are. We're trying to sell these guys a product at a very high purchase price. Yet they get their money by stuff coming in a little bit at a time. And so our suggestion is, why don't you just align your business model with your customers and how they make money? And he did this, and of course, overnight, customers that he was struggling to sign up for 6 months instantly said, yep, we're in. Because there was an alignment about his business model and his customer's business model. And so again, look at how does the money flow in and out of your business. Just taking this concept a little bit more, if you sell your product directly to the public, typically, yes, you're a locus. Your customer offer is satisfaction, and your resource issue is going to be efficiency. And so depending on what model you're playing with, it's going to work out which levers you've got to tune your business. Subscription revenue, problem management, consistency. If you have basically, this is the large account, 1 or 2 dominant accounts, can be very rewarding, but equally so can be very vulnerable. But certainly, you've got to be in partnership with your customers, because you cannot afford, if you've got one customer, you don't want to lose your one customer, right? Because that's 100% of your revenue, rather than, if you've got hundreds of customers, then it's only a decimal point on your customers. So you need to look at your business model, and it's going to change how you make decisions in your business. Now, this is where the label thing comes on. It just keeps powering on, and we see all these things. Just to whiz through them: advertising, affiliate, and I've just put a few different examples of each of these up there. You can sort of run through this list. Now, the interesting point here is it's not a case of one model being better than another. Is click the ticket better than subscription? Well, it depends on your market, how they make money, what the value is that you offer them, and all those sorts of things. And there are you might be stuck into a place. Stephen at Innerworks, you could have said, well, why didn't he just start charging a subscription base to start with? Well, bottom line is by at least selling up front to start with a fixed price, he got enough money into his business to help him employ staff and get the thing going. Maybe that was good enough to get his early customers on board. Maybe the model is going to change as you evolve your company. It's interesting. Anyone who's doing a web business, please be very wary. I see it time and time again. People come to me and they say, I've got this cool web business. I say, how are you going to make money? It's always my first question. How are you going to make money? Oh, advertising. Here's my take. Trade Me did not make any money off advertising until they sold for $700 million. Because the only way you make money off advertising is by having a large community of people coming to your website. There's something to purchase. And so please do not start a web business. The only way I'll let people get away with this, I'll say the only out on this is, have you got some major advertisers already signed up and they're prepaid? In which case, yes, you can say advertising is your model for your website. If not, sell something of value or have a strategy as to how you're going to get around that. And so, there's a whole bunch of different models here. And the list just goes on. And you can go to Wikipedia. This is where I got this list off. And you can see how all these things. But what I really want to get to tonight is to give you, and I know time's tight, is to get to the point where we can start to talk about how do you construct the model and what do you do with it. And this is a framework that's sort of evolved. Please do not think about your business model as just cost and revenue. These are just simply two of the variables that you get to play with. There are a whole bunch of other stuff. We've got a little button on here. Yeah. What are your core capabilities? What are you really, really good at? Because the stuff that you're really, really good at is typically where you can make the money. I'm an ex-engineer. I'm one of these people. I started a business. I went in, rather than buy an accounting system, I thought, hell, that's easy. I'll just create my own macros. I'll create my own. False economy. This is not my core business. My core business is not writing macros on Excel to recreate something. What am I really, really good at? Focus on that. Likewise, what is the value for your customers? And then, of course, I've just made a new widget. This is my new widget. I can only sell so many of my widgets out of the back of my car. The only way I'm going to scale my business and get it really, really going is to get someone else to sell it on behalf of me. And so who is going to go and do that? If I go and sign up Logitech or Sony or Apple or someone as a licensing partner, maybe I can make a lot more money. Maybe there's no margin in it. Maybe they're going to give me so little, it's just not worth my while. My whole point about this thing around business models is go through the options and explore and say, look, what if I did it this way? What if I did it that way? Now, this is a really good bit of reading. I recommend everyone go out and buy a copy of this book. It's called The Business Model Generation. And in fact, on the back of your sheet, which I'm going to get to in a minute, is a description of a variation of this. More and more people are using this model to describe how their businesses hang together. Now, from a capital raising point of view, we started using this in our program. Every fortnight, I get a whole bunch of people in an investment committee to go through, do we support this company and giving them some funding to go out and help them raise money? And we found when we had one of these diagrams filled out, and I'm going to go on and explain a little bit more about what it's about, it saved about half an hour off our discussion with the company, and we very quickly got focused on the right stuff. And so this is the variant that I have done, and back to the question, now what's the relevance for startup and SMEs? I have modified it so that it is more focused around startup and SMEs. Here is my blog site, succinct.co.nz. If you go and pick up, if you just under business, but it's the article is called GMC Strategy, GMC Canvas, sorry. you will see this canvas. My suggestion to all of you is go and fill out, get a big sheet of paper, the bigger the better, get a whole lot of post-it notes and just brainstorm each one of these areas in these boxes until you have filled it up. And then go through and then work out what are the key messages you want. So let's start with one of these boxes. First of all, what is the customer problem? What problem are you solving for your customers, keyword, that they will pay to fix? If you're working on a product or something, go out and talk to some people and don't just say, hey, look, I've come up with this cool new widget. It means you can advance your slides on. It's great. The question is, say, how much would you be willing to pay for that? And if you could say to them, well, would you pay $1,000 for it? No. Would you pay 100? Yes. And you can work out where that price point is. Because if they say it's just cool or it's neat, either they're being polite, but at very best, you're not going to make any money at all. And you need to very quickly find out what is the price point people will pay to solve their problem. The next thing I want you to work out is and we've got another session, we've got a whole session completely dedicated to value proposition. I think it's in about a week's time. Where's one of the? But anyhow, we're going to. We're getting a nod over the back here. In a week's time, we're going to come back and talk about value proposition. But just put it this way: how do you give your customers measurable value? This comes back to building on the point here. What problem are they solving? It's like, well, how would you measure that? And I've got an example of all this coming up in a minute. And then to take that to the next level, it's like, what is it that is your unique proposition? So we often talk about your sustainable competitive advantage. So in other words, what have you got that someone else can't have? Because if you've got a great idea, you start working on it, you start selling it, and someone else can come along and copy it and take over your space, then it just simply doesn't work. What did Trade Me have when they sold for $700 million? What was the value to Fairfax when they sold out for $700 million? Customer base. Yeah. So it's not always a patent or a trademark. Sometimes it is things like relationships, customer bases, and all those sorts of things. But you need to work out what it is that you've got that says, this is mine and you can't have it. Because otherwise, no two ways about it. You know you're doing your job right when someone comes along and tries to copy you. If no one tries to imitate you or take over you or eat your lunch, you don't have a good business. Because, this is the ecosystem of the business world out there. There's winners and losers. And the whole thing here is you want to stack it in your favour by saying, I've got this that you can't have. So then we need to look at, what are the core competencies? What are the key activities that you are doing in your business? Write them down. This is the stuff that you are not going to farm out. What are the key assets beneath that? The box. You might have some intellectual property. Maybe it's people. Maybe it's domain knowledge. And then for everything else that falls outside this realm, you're going to say, look, okay, who are we going to partner with to do the other stuff? Who are we going to have as our strategic partners? Not going to have I've got written a little word up here, key, not all, purposely saying, don't list everyone that order your supplies. The guy who provides stationery is not a key partner. But if it is special stationery that no one else has, then maybe it is. And you need to be careful about come back. Wrong way. You need to be careful about all the time looking at what's the stuff that you do in-house versus get someone else to do. One of the big things I come across, particularly in the web world, is when someone comes up with a great idea for a website, and then I say, who's developing your code for you? Oh, we're paying someone else. Now, the interesting thing about this model, in many cases, their partner, their software developer, is the only one that's ever going to get rich out of this. Because what's the incentive for them to finish the website? Nothing. You're paying them by the hour, so they just keep on going. And so sometimes it's better to look at and say, look, what are the bits that are going to cost the most and going to make us different? And so sometimes you're better off to say, you know what? Instead of paying this guy, why don't I find someone else who's willing to give up their day job, come and join me, become an equity member of, give them some shares in your business and say, you develop the code for us. And all of a sudden, then the incentives get aligned. So once we've got the product, then the next question here is like, how are you going to take it to market and who are your market? And we need to be very clear about, like, these are the segments that we're going for. And then ultimately, of course, what is your cost structure and your revenue streams? My suggestion is fill all these boxes in. And I've got a little example here. This is a company. They are a software company. They create software for scientists. And what they do is they visualize gene sequences. And so when you have a look at their business model, time and hassle to analyze sequences, access to up-to-date analysis tools, and access to large computational resources. This is a company, by the way, they've got about 3/4 of the staff have got PhDs. So a bunch of geeks on steroids. But the thing is, they add value to their customers, and it's got nothing to do with the science or the software. And this is the interesting thing, that when we start to drill into this stuff, it's measurable stuff. And in their case, they're a more mature company, so instead of having the unique proposition, we've put in here customer relationships. But again, you'll see here, we've broken down the markets into 3 different channels: online, key account, and partner sales. And then when we start to look at the cost structure, we've taken it down a bit further here and sort of said, look, and this is a bit of a work in progress for this company, but my take is, look, 70% is people, staff, 30% travel. The rest of it's insignificant. Now, the interesting thing is you need to have a look at how your costs and your business model hang together. And my suggestion is, when you set your business up eventually, have a really long discussion with your accountant about how you set up your items in your general ledger in your accounting software. Because you do not want to, every month, when it comes to printing a report out for your monthly report, to say, oh my gosh, in this particular case, this business here has online sales and key account sales. Wouldn't it be great if the monthly report, coming straight out of zero, said online sales profitability, key account sales profitability, and what were the costs associated with those when they were apportioned? Way smarter than putting all those numbers in, and then every month you've got to export them to Excel, cut them out. And I see this time and time again. The business model is fundamental as to how you structure, operate, and manage your company. Make your life simple. Think about this stuff up front. You'll see revenue here. These are all different percentages. I was talking to a bricks and mortar type company earlier on today. You know, they sell. They've just traditionally sold a publication actually, and they're shifting online. And when you look at all their public stuff, it looks like, aren't they doing a wonderful stuff online? And then you actually dig a bit deeper, and I found out this morning when I was talking to them, they're actually making about 1% of their revenue online. And so you need to look at where the percentages are lying down here. And with this, you start to get a complete map of your thing. So as I said, my suggestion to all of you is take this model away, go and fill the boxes in. Now, once you've completed that, my suggestion is then have a go at doing 2 other alternatives at least. You know, what if instead of doing some of the stuff in-house, we outsourced it? How would that change things? And then just pull together a little spreadsheet to say, look, how would that stack up as far as how our business would hang together and how we would make money?
Can I ask you something?
Sure.
Because you said I could. You're just working on assumptions there, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Life is full of assumptions, right?
How do you quantify those? Because, you could just...
Well, unless you know... Well, this
How is that valid?
it's a bit like I start out with, if I go to my... Because if I don't start out with... My assumption is that someone will pay $200 for this, so I'll design that around $200. Then I go out and... In fact, I know of a company... how many people here know Donata, the clothing company down on Featherston Street? They used to be in the incubator when they came into the incubator, and their market research, they went down with clipboards and stood down in Cuba Mall and interviewed women walking by saying, how much would you pay for this bit of clothing? What would you do with it? And they start with an assumption and then they iterate back. Okay, so now they've got that and they're right. Okay, if we can produce the bit of clothing at this price, get the lease for that, you've got to start somewhere. And so it iterates. You've got to take an educated guess. But just simply to do it blind and say, oh my gosh, I've got this really cool idea for this widget. Go to this engineer over here. Let them go free rein. They'll design something worth $500 and you'll never make a buck off it. But yes, so you've got to go out there and make an assumption. And this is the whole thing here. The first guess is never going to be appropriate. And this is the whole point where I say for people, look, come up with, please don't go off and write a big 100-page plan to start with. Because, once well, I'm not going to play with the Bible, but, once you've got the big, fat book written, it's very hard for you to throw them in the bin and start out. Whereas if you come up with a diagram like this, go off and do some assumptions, do some testing, come up with a simple little spreadsheet, take that out and do something with it, it's very easy for you to rip it in half and start again. And I think often too many people spend too long and they actually don't do that feedback loop. And yeah, but we're going to cover that in a lot more detail. I'm only going to touch briefly on this mainly because value proposition is one of those boxes, and just in case no one doesn't come along. If you do not have a value proposition, this is my big sell job for those to come along to the value proposition workshop. If you do not have a value proposition, you will not have a business. And I see it time and time again. And it was interesting, writing an article that's one of the Unlimited magazine people were asking about number one reasons why people get turned down for investment, and I said no clear value proposition. And why do we know that they don't get investment? Because we know that it's going to be very difficult for them to sell stuff if there is no value given out the other side. So yeah, I've created this really cool little thing, but if no one cares enough about it, and we just go over to the keyboard, and we're quite happy to hit the button here, and say, you know what, we don't need one of these things, we don't have a business. We've got a cool idea, we've got a cool science project, a cool technology project, we do not have a business. The product you are building is a business, not a product. And I think too many people get hung up about just simply having the product. And this is just basically, just to skim over this area, the value proposition may be financial, strategic, or personal. But we're going to go into a lot more detail around this when we come back and talk about value propositions. Likewise, what does all this stuff mean? Because we've got a business model. What is the relevance of it and how do we use it? Here's my take. Look, if you've got a business plan and a business model and you're not using it to make decisions every day in your business, you've just wasted all your time creating that. And so this is one of my sort of things that I use. I call it the GMC Guide to Know, which is fundamental, I believe, in most business people. I've never yet met a business person who goes to the office and sits there and twiddles their thumb and says, oh my gosh, I've got no idea what I could do today. Generally, it's like, oh my gosh, I've got too much to do, don't have enough time, don't have enough cash. So how do you decide? And so I've got this quick list of questions up here. Does it add value to the customers? Does it make money? Does it fit our business model? And so that was the relevance of this slide today, was just simply to anchor you back onto that point. If it does not fit your business model, then why are you doing it? And if it's that important to do, then perhaps you got the business model wrong, which is back to your point. How do you know when you got it right? And if you're not challenging it all the time and referencing it, and that's why I'm a real fan of having one of these diagrams on the board, one of those canvas diagrams on the board, adapt it to whatever works for you. A lot of people say, oh, there's all these different templates. Find something that is relevant for you. And I think there's in your business plan you've got to submit for those that are progressing with the bright ideas, you need to put our business model in. My suggestion is put one of those canvas diagrams in, because the people assessing it will get the overall picture and then give them some of the details they ask about revenue, streams, margin, and those sorts of things. But they can be illustrated in that diagram. Likewise, just a couple of closing slides on business models. Please do not underestimate the cost of doing the other stuff. This is what they refer to as the rule of tens, which basically says, hey, I've got an idea for creating a great product. I'm going to create a prototype. That typically will cost me 10 units of energy, time and money. And the trouble is too many entrepreneurs spend all their time, energy and money up in simply creating a product. But we know for a fact, having looked at a number of businesses, no matter what it costs you to build your first product, you can multiply it by 10 to take it to market. You can multiply it by 100 to build a brand, and certainly by 1,000 to build an international brand. And so make sure you've got enough money left in the tank so that you time, energy and passion to do the complete job. That's it for me. I'm going to take a few questions out there. For those that really like this sort of stuff, we are redoing Activate. We're going to change the format slightly. We're going to have a weekend boot camp, so you're going to end up with, you'll come out of that weekend with every goddamn answer you need to know, even if the answer is simply, oh my gosh, this business is not worthwhile pursuing.